Hello, my name is John Corstein. I'm Director Emeritus of the USS Monitor Center here at the Mariners Museum at Bark. And it's my pleasure to give you another program in our Monitor Legacy series. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most pivotal battles, naval battles during the Civil War, the Battle of Mobile Bay. You know, there's an unseen battlefield in every human breast, where two opposing forces meet and where they seldom rest. This is really a story not just about ships, but of two men. The two leading admirals of the Civil War will lead their opposing sides. We're talking about David Glasgow Farragut and, of course, Franklin Buchanan. And Franklin Buchanan already had reached tremendous fame with his victory over the Congress in Cumberland. He'd been in the Navy since 1815. He went to Japan with Perry. He was superintendent of the U.S. Navy. He was the founding superintendent of the U.S. Naval Academy. And you find him at the outbreak of the war with his family at the Washington Navy Yard, where he will actually, he's from Maryland. His wife's family, believe it or not, enslaved 700 people. They lived on the eastern shore in Talbot County. One of their enslaved people was Frederick Douglass. So yeah, it's hard to believe all this stuff, but it's all true. But Buchanan is, of course, when the war breaks out, he doesn't know what to do, but when Maryland has the April 19th, 1861 riot on Pratt Street, he resigns his commission, thinking Maryland is going to leave the Union. However, when Maryland doesn't leave the Union, he writes back to Gideon Welles, I was a little hasty, I'd like to have my job back, and Gideon Welles writes across the letter, "You are a traitor, you are dismissed." And so, free agent now, Buchanan joins the Confederate Navy. After his stirring victory on March 8, 1862, he will be named full admiral in the Confederate Navy. And once he healed from his grievous wound at the Battle of Hampton Roads, he will then, of course, head to Mobile Bay. Well, well, anyway, so the opposing person is, of course, David Farragut, and we'll see a picture of him eventually, but David Glasgow Farragut, was born James Farragut. His father was a Revolutionary War naval officer who was from Majorca, right? So Farragut will become the highest ranking Hispanic during the Civil War. His father will move from Campbell Station, Tennessee, and down to the Navy Yard at New Orleans, where his mother will die in 1810. He's 9 years old. And so George Farragut, his father, has a brood of 11 children, and so he's starting to pass them off, because he just couldn't handle it. And so one of them he gave to David Dixon Porter, the number two. There's actually three David Dixon Porters in naval history. So anyway, David Dixon Porter, II, will he will take on Farragut, makes him midshipman at age 9, and he actually, I think one of my favorite stories about him is he's down in the Pacific, fighting against the English at that time. This is during the War of 1812. They capture a ship, which becomes a prize, and Farragut is placed in command of that at age 12. They say he was 110 pounds, 90 pounds of uniforms and swords, you know. So, but he put down a mutiny. So you can well imagine this guy was tough, stern, and we'll see more traits of him as we go through. Of course, he fought in the Mexican War. He established Mare Island Naval Shipyard, or Navy Yard at that time, in San Francisco. So now what are we looking at here? Well, you could see this is the Gulf of Mexico. By 1864, the only available ports would be Galveston, which is on the wrong side of the Mississippi, and then it will be, well, that's not working, but you can see you can see Mobile Bay. And here is a real good view of Mobile Bay. Mobile Bay is defended by 3 coastal defense forces. One is Fort Morgan, that's mounted with 47 guns. Its water battery features like 7-inch Brook guns. Those are Brook rifles. A very powerful fort. It's originally built as the 3rd system of coastal defense forts. Across the harbor's entrance is going to be Fort Gaines. Fort Gaines is armed with 18 guns, and they're to close the channel. Now, the big thing is that, so Fort Gaines, well, I passed it by there, and then right up here at Grants Pass is another small fort, and that fort is going to be there to guard what's known as Grants Pass. And of course, it is only armed with 12 guns, but it's another brick fort built on a clam bank, believe it or not. So that is the defenses of Mobile Bay. So the other way we want to defend Mobile Bay, and look, that's 30 miles away to get to Mobile from after you come into the entrance. In fact, there's an area right around here called the anchorage. So that's as far as ships could go to the depth of the water, and they had to have lighters to move the stuff to the shore. So it's a major port city, Spanish influences, French influences, and so this is the key because this is in Alabama, and so you can take supplies from Mobile and you can go up the Florida and Savannah Railroad and get all the way to Richmond. You know, so this is avenue of supplies for the Confederate. The best port is, of course, going to be Fort Fisher, but that's what makes Mobile Bay, I think, so important. This is Major Dabney Maury. He commands the coastal defense fortifications along at the mouth of the bay. Now, I got to tell you, he's actually formerly in the U.S. Navy. He couldn't get a good position in the Navy because there are so many other officers and only so many ships. He joins the Army, and he's actually a cousin of Robert E. Lee. You know, so he's an FFV, and so he takes command of. Basically, he's at Fort Morgan. Of course, we know Fort Morgan is going to be named for Daniel Morgan, the very famous naval officer during the Revolutionary War. I think Fort Gaines is named for Edmund Pendleton Gaines, a general during the Seminole Wars, and Fort Powell is also named for a friend of Winfield Scott, who's a brevet brigadier general during the Seminole Wars and the Mexican War. So you want to be friends with Winfield Scott. So nevertheless, I got to tell you, this is Fort Morgan after the fight, but you can see it's a very imposing position. Right in front of here is going to be where the water battery is located. And the water battery is, of course, right at the level of the water, basically, so that you got a direct shot against the enemy. And it's a typical fort. You go inside Fort Macon, Fort Monroe, you'll see some of the same things. And you can see they have their top tier of guns. Look at the smoke damage. That's not from fire, that's from firing their guns. And this is a nice view of Fort Gaines. See, you can see right here where it's been modernized, okay? That's called the Endicott Plan of Coastal Defense Fortifications. And this is not much. So this is Fort Powell, and it's on a clam bank. And see these, though? What they did is they put in obstructions. Now, at the entrance to Mobile Bay, we will see that these obstructions are going to force anybody attacking Mobile Bay in through a small corridor. Okay? So they put these log obstructions. They also, I'll just show you another picture. Yeah, so you can see the water battery right there. Okay, you can see what type of fire they have. On the other side of the wooden ships will be a row of obstructions and then a row of torpedoes. And torpedoes, as you know, were developed during the Civil War. They're actually mines, and they were contact mines at Mobile Bay. They also had electronic, but in this case, they have and basically how you make a torpedo is you get a beer keg, put it together, right? Put cones on the end, keep it buoyant, and then you put a bunch of powder in it, seal it up with tar, and then you have a little glass top which has fulminate of mercury in it, so that when you break that, like a ship going over it, it then sends a spark into, boom. So that's the whole concept of those. I have to say, this is right after the battle. Okay, so you can see, now, you see where they say torpedoes here? Whoopsie. That is actually, there's one narrow way to get in, right? And through the obstruction, because you got blockade runners coming in, and so that will give them what they, the room they need to actually do what they have to do. I have to say that Farragut has been planning this operation for some time. He actually is the victor of New Orleans. He's won, his fleet also helps win Vicksburg. He is defeated somewhat at the Battle of Port Hudson, but he runs past the batteries and only one ship gets past. So running past batteries seems to be taking a chance, but all these coastal defense fortifications are built to fight against sailing ships. So as a result of that, and not so much shell guns or rifled guns. So with steamship, you just move right past it, and you will not be, well, you hope you're not sunk. At Port Hudson, of course, they lost the USS Mississippi to gunfire, damaged 4 other ships. So this is a real risky thing to do. Now, so Farragut uses the same tactics he's going to have at Mobile Bay. However, this time he is going to have monitors. He has learned that combat between wooden ships and ironclads is not a good idea. Okay, so he advocates having more ironclads, and so he will actually get 4 ironclads sent down to him: the Chickasaw, the Manhattan, the Tecumseh, and I'll remember that one soon. And these are the Chickasaw and the Winnebago. There we go. Are 2 twin-turreted monitors built in St. Louis. They come down the river. The Manhattan and the Tecumseh are Iconoclast style ironclads or monitors, and they have to come all the way down from New York. So, in fact, the last one arrives on April 4th, 1864, the day before this attack is going to happen. So Farragut plans this. He's going to inside his area, this is where he's coming. Inside is going to be the 4 monitors. The idea is the monitors are supposed to protect the wooden ships to a certain extent, but also the Union knows all about the Tennessee. And the Tennessee, according to rumors, was the greatest ironclad built in the South. So, and it's commanded by Franklin Buchanan, who some would say is, when he's in a battle, his battle blood gets up. You know, in other words, he's a fierce fighter. So, so Farragut will have the inside of the monitors, and then he'll come in this order. The Brooklyn, right, commanded by James Alden, is going to come in. He's paired with another ship. On the Brooklyn, they have, and what they paired, you know, it's like the Hartford and the Metacomet, they're lashed together. The idea is everything's a steamship, but if the main sloop, the sloop of war, like the Hartford, gets damaged, if its engine is, the boiler is shot through, you know, you're not going to move anywhere. And so that other steamer on the other side is supposed to be able to move you past the fort. You can't stand still at the fort because your advantage is I'm moving. Instead of an old school would be actually bringing my wooden ship up and firing at a fort, and that only works so well. So the Brooklyn will be tied to the Octora, and actually it has on its bow what is called a devil's raft, but it's Erickson patented torpedo removing raft. Okay, and this is something he invents, which is terrible, but it's a big wooden structure, right, that is lashed to the bow of a vessel. It's got grappling hooks on it, and they actually had a torpedo, spar torpedo at the bow, but they took that off because they didn't think it was safe. So this raft is supposed to pick the torpedoes up out of your way with the grappling hooks, and so you can go into a harbor and not worry about sinking. Well, it's unwieldy. It slows the craft down. So these folks are coming in not at their top speed of, like the Hartford is a little over 10 knots. So what's going to happen is that they're going slower because of that fewer torpedoes. Now, so the Brooklyn is October, Hartford, the Metacomet, Richmond tied to the Port Royal, Lackawanna, the Seminole, Monongahela, Kennebec, and Ossipee is Stasha, and Oneida, the Galena. And that's the Galena ironclad that was defeated at the Battle of Drury's Bluff, but it was so bad they took the iron off of it. So, you know, some concepts don't work very well. Erickson's torpedo raft did not work well. So, we have this line of ships coming in, and so typically the sloops of war will have 20 9-inch Dahlgrens. Then they'll have 2 pivot guns. The pivot guns would be like a 11-inch Dahlgren or a 100-pounder Parrott rifle. The Hartford itself has a 30-pounder Parrott rifle and then the 11-inch Dahlgren. So it's got a lot of firepower, but still, it's a dangerous, this is a very daring attack. So it's like the Winnebago has twin turrets with 4 11-inch Dahlgrens. They could go 9 knots, and the Manhattan, which is a Iconoclast monitor, had 2 15-inch Dahlgrens. How about that? 11-inch Dahlgren, 11-inch armor. So these 15-inch on a revolving turret, the one thing they learned by 1865 or the North, that if you have a 15-pounder or a 15-inch Dahlgren, you can break the casemate of a Confederate ironclad with the right shot. So that's why that ship has those 2 15-inch Dahlgrens. They are huge, and you can imagine how they fit into a turret. So the big thing is that here they come, right? And the good old Tecumseh is commanded by Tunis Craven. And Tunis Craven is a long-standing naval officer. His brother is also a naval officer. And so he, as he comes in, all right, so this is part of the Confederate gunboats. The Selma, the Gaines, these are wooden gunboats of no importance. The main ship is going to be the Tennessee. The Confederates in Mobile Bay will also build the CSS Baltic, and it was called a punk ship by Charles Carroll Sims because it was poorly armored. The paddle wheels are not armored, and so Franklin Buchanan has the armor taken off to put on another ironclad that they're building in Selma, Alabama, which is not going to be ready, it's the Nashville, for this battle. They also build 2 floating batteries, but those floating batteries were supposed to be actually workable ironclads, except their engine systems only allowed them to go 3.5 knots. So, you can't stem the turret, so that means they're floating batteries. So really, Buchanan has 1 ironclad. He's waiting for the Nashville to be finished when Farragut comes aboard. There is of course, the Tennessee. And you can see it's a ironclad ram. It goes a little over 5 knots, okay? That's a problem, because remember, Farragut's ship like this, the Hartford, goes 10 knots. So, and the idea, of course, there's the Richmond, there's the Brooklyn that causes all the problems soon, the Nita. So you can see it's a powerful fleet of gunboats that Farragut is bringing with him. So this is, of course, the Octora. We can see they're all named. The Chickasaw, which is, those turrets are not Erickson turrets. Those are invented by James Eads. And James Eads, of course, is a snag boat operator. He actually builds the city-class ironclads on the western rivers. He also is a bridge builder. He does everything. So he invents his own turret, which is better than the Erickson turret. This is a bad sketch of the Winnebago. Of course, this is inaccurate of the Manhattan. Look at where the turret is. But they had great trouble coming in to harbor. Now, so Farragut has with him 2,000 soldiers, right, under the command of Brigadier General Edward Canby. Canby actually fights at the Battle of Glorieta Pass, he is ardent abolitionist. And so Farragut knows you can't take a place on land just with ships. You can pass by them, you can blow them up, but you got to have real support to take over the fort. And so as a result of that, Canby is brought with troops. They will land at Grant's Pass, which is a smaller entrance to Mobile Bay, where Fort Powell is located. So, okay, now, so we see how you get to come in to Mobile Bay. And the big thing is, you can see where Fort Powell is, the obstructions in front of Fort Morgan, because it's too shallow to get real close to Fort Gaines. And so as a result of that, there's Gaines, these are the obstructions. So we're forcing everybody into a narrow path, 60 yards wide. And so when we begin this attack at 6:15. Guns start firing by 7:20 in the morning, and Tavares got the tide and the wind. In other words, the wind's blowing the gun smoke away from his ships onto the fort. So the fort has more difficulty in seeing their targets. So as a result of this, as they come in now to Tecumseh with Craven, he's got one job, and that is to keep Confederate ironclad away from the wooden ships. So when they come in, and there's this red buoy right there, right? And that shows where the torpedo field is. So you have to go inside the red buoy. But as the Tecumseh comes through, the Tennessee is moving towards the Brooklyn, right? And so the Tecumseh has to move in her way, and that brings the ship. Now just remember, the current's fast. There are all these factors that makes it difficult. One of the problems with monitors is they did not steer well, okay, because of their speed and so forth. So as a result of that, the Tecumseh comes through and veers a little bit to head off the Tennessee when the Tecumseh will strike a torpedo. Now, one of the faults of a monitor is the hull is made of 1-inch plate. So you're very vulnerable there. In fact, the Confederates start designing their ironclads with rams that went under the armored deck. You go in the Monitor Center, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So this iron hull is weak. And so the goal is, we want to ram it. It's susceptible to torpedoes. And in fact, in this case, we'll see that the Tecumseh goes over a torpedo, and everyone is shocked. When this explosion happens, there's going down. The whole battlefield is quiet. They're all shocked at what they see. This ship will, according to one eyewitness, her stern lifted high in the air with the propeller still revolving, and the ship pitched out of sight like an arrow twanged from the bow. 90 seconds. Tunis Craven is getting out of the boat through the turret, right? And he's with the pilot. And Craven says, "After you, pilot." And so the pilot gets out, and then Craven goes down with the ship. So, manners get you only so far, I think. I'm kidding about that. Don't tell my mother, right? So this is a good example of a Confederate torpedo, as I explained earlier. And another view of the battle itself. Now, I got to tell you that Farragut, when the oh my gosh, when the Tecumseh goes down, this shocks the entire U.S. Navy, right? I mean, they don't know what to do. And so Farragut, actually, the Brooklyn stops, commanded by James Alden, and he will stop his ship. Now, the worst thing to do is stop your ship in front of the fort, and he's not going anywhere. What's going on, you know? He said, torpedoes ahead. And so this is what Farragut actually says. Now everyone says, damn the torpedoes. But he did say, damn the torpedoes. 4 bells, Captain Drayton. Go ahead, Jolette, full speed. That's to the Metacama. And what they do is they go around the Brooklyn, right? And they go right through our favorite little torpedo field. And the men on the Hartford can hear the clicking of the primers, you know, and they don't work because they've been in the water too long. And as a result of that, the Hartford goes through, everybody else goes through. The Tennessee tries to go get them. However, it's too slow to cut off the Hartford or even the Brooklyn. And so Buchanan takes his ship behind Fort Morgan. Now, I have to say, this is, Farragut or Buchanan is a guy who doesn't like to give up, you know. He decides that he's going to have to attack the Union fleet. In fact, I got a great quote. Everybody has taken it into their heads that one ship can whip a dozen, and that if the trial is not made, we who are in her are damned for life. In other words, Buchanan knew he had to attack the Union fleet. Now, I have to tell you, when he fought in the Battle of Hampton Roads, what did he do on the first day? He attacked the entire Union fleet, sank several ships, captured some transports. It was a great Confederate victory. Here, he's just got too much against him. So, Buchanan begins steaming forward. This is known as the anchorage, right here. And so, actually, there you can see the Tennessee. Now, the Tennessee, as it approaches the Hartford, tries to ram the Hartford at its bow. And that could have sank that ship. And somehow they miss, and the ships scrape each other as they go along the sides. This is where the Brook guns fire deadly shot into the Hartford, and that's Drayton and Farragut. See how close the ship is? I mean, that's called close combat. And actually, Percival Drayton, standing on the poop deck up there next to Farragut, you can see him lashed to the rigging. Actually, he's farther up. Some people said he had a telescope, but he had a speaking trumpet, right? So you could hear what he's saying, because he's up there above the smoke. So he can see what he wants everyone to do. But look at this. In fact, Drayton looks through the Tennessee gun port, and he sees Buchanan. And he takes his binoculars and throws it inside. You infernal traitor. And, that didn't do much damage. Buchanan has his hands full, however. I got to tell you that they are going to, the Union ships kind of hover around the Tennessee, and each of these wooden ships try to ram it. The Hartford rams it once. The Lackawanna tries to ram the Tennessee, but guess what? She misses and rams into the Hartford and cracks the Hartford, and it's right where Farragut's up there in the rigging, looking down, and the crack comes right there. And it goes all the way down to just above the waterline. Farragut says, we're okay, we're going to continue the fight. So he rams the Tennessee. We have also the Monongahela will ram 2 times. But the one ship that's really causing the trouble is this one right here. This is the Chickasaw. The Chickasaw, right, is going to have 11-inch Dahlgrens. But look how close she is to the Tennessee. And so firing 11-inch Dahlgren, full powder charge from 50 feet, 20 feet, they're going to have an impact. In fact, you can see all the dents in the casemate. Actually, a shot from the Manhattan will crack the casemate. The Chickasaw comes up and starts improving that crack. Actually, what's going to happen is that the Chickasaw will aim for this one gun port. Its shutter has been jammed. And so inside the Tennessee, there are these workmen, right, mechanics from the engine room, trying to get it to work again. Buchanan's there telling them what to do. And of course, another shot comes from the Chickasaw and hits the gun port. One man who's actually leaning out of the gun port, he'll be disintegrated. 2 others are killed, and Buchanan has the bolt from the shutter hit him in the leg, breaking his leg. He falls down. Ship's surgeon, now he had told his men at the beginning of the battle, I trust you all to do the best you can do, the best you can for the Confederacy, that we'll sink before we surrender. Rousing stuff from Buchanan. However, he is grievously wounded. Joseph Conrad, the surgeon, will come up and say, "Are you hurt, Admiral?" And Buchanan says, "I think so." So it's kind of matter of fact. And so Conrad picks the guy up on his back and has to take him down the ladder to the surgeon's operating room. And he said as he was taking Buchanan down, Buchanan's leg was flopping against his leg. I mean, just imagine, Buchanan's going, oh, well, and so they lay him down, they temporarily set it, and James Johnson is actually Captain James Johnson is the real commander of the Tennessee. Buchanan is in command of everything. So Johnson comes down and sees Buchanan, and Buchanan says, I know the odds are against us, but we must fight and sink before we surrender. Johnson says, I will do the best I can. Well, by this time, the Chickasaw had cut the steering chains of the Tennessee, so it can't go anywhere. The smokestack had been knocked off, so obnoxious fumes are coming in to the Tennessee. It is a nightmare inside the casemate. One crew member said he thought he was in hell, and you think about gun smoke, coal smoke, right? And that's just deadly. And so nevertheless, the Tennessee has nowhere it can move because its engines can't perform without that stack. So as a result of it all, we'll see Johnson comes down to Buchanan, says, well, we can't move our ship. We can't fire our guns. Many of our primers are worthless. They are duds. And so what should I do? If you feel you have to, Johnson, surrender. And so Johnson actually will put up the white flag. A boat comes. He will be taken on board the Hartford, and he's met at the gangway of the Hartford, guess what? By Percival Drayton, his friend from the old Navy, and he says, well, good to see you today. The guy's just surrendered. We just fought a fierce battle. He said, I have a bottle of champagne on ice for you, and it's like, wow, But that is a true story. So, nevertheless, the Tennessee will then be repaired by the Federals. There it is under federal command, and it's used to bombard. Whoopsie! It's used to bombard Fort Morgan when General Dabney has to surrender. He is so mad that he doesn't want to surrender to any cursed Yankee. He says that, And then he takes his sword and breaks it across his leg because he doesn't want to give up his sword to the infernal traitors. And they said that was a pathetic move on your part, but nevertheless, you can see that's utter defeat. The loss of Mobile Bay is extremely important for the Union because it is at a time when Grant is in Virginia, slugging it towards Richmond, very bloody battles, the Wilderness, Spotsylvania Courthouse, Coal Harbor, the siege of Petersburg, and everyone's getting war weary. In fact, Lincoln is afeared he may not get reelected. So what's going to happen is that this victory brings great news to the North, and it's followed by the capture of Atlanta, and then the October 19th, 1864 Battle of Cedar Creek. That means the Northern public knows they're on the right target, and so they think, yes, indeed, the war will end with the Union brought back together. Okay? And that's the Battle of Mobile Bay.